My father was the kind of man people wrote eulogies about while he was still alive. Dr. Thomas Hartwell, cardiologist, philanthropist, devoted husband and father, the man who coached my Little League team, who slow danced with my mother at every wedding, who never missed a single one of my piano recitals, even the terrible ones. He was the standard against which I measured every man I ever dated, and they all came up short. For 31 years, I believed I was the luckiest daughter in the world. Then I found the photograph. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were when I visited my parents for dinner, a tradition we'd kept since I moved out at 22. Mom would make pot roast, Dad would pour wine. We'd talk about nothing important, and I'd leave feeling full in ways that had nothing to do with food. But that Tuesday, Mom was at her book club, and Dad had been called to the hospital for an emergency surgery. I was alone in their house, looking for a phone charger in my father's study, when I found it. The photograph was in a locked drawer. I only opened it because I was looking for a spare key Mom had mentioned, and the lock was flimsy, the kind that pops open if you jiggle it right. Inside was a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful. Dark hair, warm smile, maybe mid-40s. She was standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, her arm around two teenagers, a boy and a girl. The boy looked about 16, the girl maybe 14. They all had my father's eyes. Have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew? Not a small secret, something that rewrote your entire history? If you have, you'll understand the feeling that hit me in that moment, like the floor had disappeared and I was falling through space with nothing to grab onto. Let me know in the comments if you've been there, because I'm still not sure I've hit the ground. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, Tom, Melissa, Lucas, and Sophie. Christmas 2019. Tom. Only my mother called him Tom. Everyone else called him Thomas or Dr. Hartwell. But here was this woman, this Melissa, using my mother's name for him. And those children, Lucas and Sophie. My father had other children? I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe? Hours. Time had stopped making sense. I just stared at those faces, those strangers who shared my blood, and tried to understand how my entire life had been a lie. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Dad. Asterisk. Surgery ran long. Sorry I missed you, sweetheart. Love you. I stared at the words. The same words he'd sent 1,000 times. The same casual affection. The same easy love. Sweetheart? Did he call Sophie that too? I put the photograph back, closed the drawer, walked out of my father's study on legs that didn't feel like my own. I didn't stay for pot roast. I drove home in a daze, pulled into my apartment parking lot, and sat in my car for an hour, trying to remember how to breathe. My father had a second family. My perfect, devoted, wonderful father had been lying to us for years, and I had no idea what to do with that. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did what any millennial with an internet connection and a desperate need for answers would do. I searched Melissa, Lucas, Sophie, Christmas 2019, my father's name, his medical license, his conference schedules, his hospital affiliations, his published papers. By 4 a.m., I had a timeline. The second family lived in Colorado, a small town called Ridgewood, about 40 minutes outside Denver. Property records showed a house purchased in 2008, the year I turned 18, in the name of a trust I'd never heard of. The trustee was a law firm in Chicago. The beneficiary was listed only as M. Hartwell. M. Hartwell. Melissa Hartwell. She had taken his name. More searching. Social media was sparse. Melissa's Facebook was private, and the kids didn't seem to have public accounts. But I found a LinkedIn profile for a Melissa Hartwell in Ridgewood, Colorado. She was a freelance graphic designer. Her profile picture matched the woman in the photograph. And then I found the article. It was from a local Colorado newspaper dated 2015. A feel-good piece about a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. The headline, "Local Doctor Donates Record Sum to Pediatric Care." The photo showed my father, younger, smiling, presenting an oversized check to hospital administrators. Standing beside him, her hand on his arm, was Melissa. The caption read, "Dr. Thomas Hartwell and his wife, Melissa, at the annual Hearts for Hope Gala." His wife. I read that word 17 times. His wife. My mother's name was Catherine Hartwell. She'd been Catherine Hartwell since 1985, 3 years before I was born. She'd worn his ring for 38 years, raised his daughter, built a life around the understanding that she was his partner, his love, his only. And all that time, there was another wife, another ring, another life. How was this possible? Bigamy was illegal. You couldn't just marry two people and hope no one noticed. There were records, documents, systems designed specifically to prevent this. Unless the second marriage wasn't legal. Unless Melissa believed she was married, but the paperwork told a different story. Unless my father had found a way to create the illusion of commitment without the legal reality. Or, and this thought made my stomach turn, unless my mother's marriage was the fake one. I needed to know more. But I couldn't ask my father, couldn't confront him with questions I didn't know how to form. And I definitely couldn't tell my mother, not until I understood what I was dealing with. So I did something crazy. I booked a flight to Colorado. Ridgewood was the kind of town that existed on postcards. Main Street had a bakery, a bookshop, a family-owned hardware store. The houses were well kept, the lawns were green, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. It was aggressively charming in a way that made me uncomfortable, like a movie set waiting for the director to yell "cut." I checked into the only hotel in town, a bed and breakfast run by an elderly woman named Dorothy, who asked too many questions about why I was visiting. "Just passing through," I lied. "Thought I'd see some of the mountain scenery." "Well, you picked a lovely time. The aspens are just starting to turn." I smiled, nodded, pretended I cared about aspens. What I cared about was the house on Maple Street. I'd found the address in the property records, a 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, the kind of house that belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting. I drove past it 3 times before I worked up the courage to park. The mailbox said Hartwell. Hartwell. My name. On a house I'd never seen, in a town I'd never visited, belonging to a family I'd never known existed. I sat in my rental car, watching the house, trying to figure out my next move. I could knock on the door, introduce myself, watch Melissa's face as she realized who I was. But what would that accomplish? What would I even say? "Hi, I'm your husband's other daughter, the one from his real family, or maybe his fake family. I'm honestly not sure anymore." Before I could decide, the front door opened. A girl walked out, blonde hair, maybe 15 now, older than the photograph. She was wearing a high school sweatshirt and carrying a backpack. Sophie, my half-sister. She walked to the end of the driveway, checked her phone, and waited. A car pulled up a minute later, another teenager driving, probably a friend. Sophie climbed in, and they drove away. I watched until the car disappeared around the corner. She had no idea I existed. She had no idea her entire life was built on the same lie as mine. I sat there for another hour, watching the house. Melissa came out once to water the plants on the porch. She looked older than in the photograph, tired, maybe, or worried. She glanced at my car, but didn't seem to find it suspicious. Why would she? Strangers passed through Ridgewood all the time. I was just another tourist admiring the architecture. I'm not a tourist, asterisk, I wanted to scream. I'm your husband's daughter. I'm proof that everything you believe is a lie. But I didn't scream, didn't get out of the car, didn't do anything except watch and wonder and try to understand how my father had managed to build two complete lives without either of them knowing about the other. Or maybe they did know. Maybe Melissa knew about us. Maybe my mother knew about them. Maybe I was the only one who'd been kept in the dark. That thought was somehow worse than anything else. I stayed in Ridgewood for 3 days. I told myself I was gathering information, building a picture, figuring out the truth before I made any decisions about what to do with it. But really, I was just afraid. Afraid to confront Melissa. Afraid to reveal myself to my half-siblings. Afraid to go home and face my father with what I knew. So I watched, waited, became a ghost in a town that didn't know I existed. On the 3rd day, I went to a diner for breakfast, one of those old-fashioned places with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. I ordered coffee and pancakes and pretended to read a book while I eavesdropped on the locals. That's when I heard it. "Did you see Melissa at church yesterday? She looked exhausted." 2 women in the booth behind me, gossiping over eggs and toast. I'm not surprised. Tom's been traveling more than ever. She's basically raising those kids alone. I don't know how she does it. My husband's gone for 1 week and I'm climbing the walls. Well, that's what you sign up for when you marry a doctor. The hours, the emergencies, the constant being on call. Still, you'd think after 20 years he could slow down a little. 20 years. My father had been living this double life for 20 years. I was 11 when it started. When he started, I thought about all the business trips, the conferences, the emergencies that pulled him away on weekends and holidays. I thought about my mother making excuses. "Your father works so hard, sweetheart. He's saving lives." He wasn't saving lives. He was living another one. The women paid their bill and left. I sat there, coffee growing cold, trying to reconcile the father I knew with the man they were describing. Tom's been traveling more than ever. Of course he had, because he had 2 families to maintain, 2 wives to appease, 2 sets of children to pretend to love. Or maybe he did love us, all of us. Maybe that was the worst part, that his love was real, even if everything else was a lie. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Mom, haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay? Dad's asking about you." Dad's asking about me? I imagined him sitting in his study, surrounded by evidence of his double life, wondering if his other daughter had discovered his secret. I typed back, "Fine, just busy with work. Talk soon." I couldn't face her. Not yet. Not until I knew more. After the diner, I did something reckless. I went to the high school. I don't know what I was thinking. That I'd see Lucas and Sophie, that I'd somehow understand them better if I watched them in their natural habitat. It was stupid, creepy probably, but I couldn't stop myself. The school was a sprawling brick building on the edge of town. I parked across the street and waited for the final bell. When the doors opened and students poured out, I scanned the crowd. There, Lucas. He was taller than in the photograph, 18 now, probably a senior. He had my father's jaw, my father's walk. He was laughing at something a friend said, slapping him on the back with easy confidence. He looked happy, secure, like someone who'd never questioned who he was or where he came from, like I used to look. Sophie came out a few minutes later, surrounded by a group of girls. She was animated, talking with her hands, making the others laugh. She had my father's smile, that wide, genuine grin that made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. I watched them until they drove away. Lucas in a pickup truck, Sophie in a friend's SUV. My siblings, 2 strangers who shared half my DNA. Did they know about me? About my mother? I had to find out. I found Melissa alone. It was the fourth day. I'd been watching the house all morning, waiting for the kids to leave for school, waiting for the right moment. At 10 a.m., I walked up to the front door and knocked. She answered on the third knock. Up close, she was prettier than the photograph suggested. Warm eyes, laugh lines, the kind of face that made you want to trust her. "Can I help you?" I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. I had a speech prepared, calm, rational, designed to minimize shock and maximize information. Instead, I said, "My name is Rebecca Hartwell. I'm Thomas's daughter, his other daughter." Melissa's face went white. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. She just stared at me, her hand gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "You know," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded slowly. "I've always known." The world tilted. "You've always known?" "Tom told me about Catherine before we got married. He told me about you." Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. I knew what I was getting into. At this point, I had more questions than I could count, but the biggest one was this. If Melissa knew about us, did that mean my mother knew about her? Had everyone been in on the secret except me? I'm still wrestling with this, and I need your help. What do you think? Was my mother a victim, like I assumed? Or was she a participant in something I didn't understand? Drop your guess in the comments before you keep reading. "Can I come in?" I asked. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house was warm, cozy, family photographs covered the walls. Melissa and my father, Lucas and Sophie, all of them together at birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments. A life documented in frames. We sat in the living room. Melissa offered tea. I accepted because I didn't know what else to do. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Not enough. I found a photograph in my father's study, you and the kids. I did some research and—" I gestured around the room. "Here I am. Does Tom know you're here?" "No." "Does my mother know about you?" Melissa was quiet for a moment. She stirred her tea, though she'd added nothing to it. "Yes," she finally said. "Catherine knows." The room spun. That's not possible. She would have told me. She would have— It's complicated, Rebecca. Everything about this situation is complicated. Then uncomplicated. Tell me the truth. All of it. Melissa set down her cup, looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Your father and I met 23 years ago. I was a patient. He performed my bypass surgery when I was 32. We fell in love. I know how that sounds, but it was real. It is real." "But he was married." "Yes, and he told me he couldn't leave Catherine, that it would destroy her, destroy you. He said he loved her, loved you both, but that he also loved me, that he had enough love for 2 families." I laughed. It came out harsh, broken. Enough love? Like love is something you can portion out. I didn't say it made sense. I just said it was real. She paused. "I knew what I was agreeing to when I married him. I knew there would be another woman, another child. I made peace with it because I wanted a life with him, even if it was only half a life. And my mother, she just accepted this?" Melissa's expression shifted. Something darker flickered across her face. "Your mother and Tom have their own arrangement. I don't know all the details, but she knows about us. She's known for almost 20 years. That's impossible." "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but your mother isn't the victim you think she is." I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore, couldn't pretend to be calm. "I don't believe you." "Then ask her yourself." I left Ridgewood that afternoon. I didn't say goodbye to Melissa, didn't try to meet Lucas or Sophie. I just got in my car, drove to the airport, and booked the first flight back home. The whole way, Melissa's words echoed in my head. "Your mother isn't the victim you think she is. She knows about us. She's known for almost 20 years. It couldn't be true. My mother, sweet, devoted, long-suffering Catherine, couldn't have known about Melissa and said nothing. Couldn't have watched my father leave for his business trips, knowing he was going to another woman, another family. Could she? I thought about all the years, all the times my father was away, all the moments my mother had seemed distant, distracted, sad in ways I couldn't name. I'd always assumed she was lonely, missing him, wishing he could be home more. What if she was grieving something else entirely? What if she knew exactly where he was and had chosen to accept it? The plane landed at 9 p.m. I didn't go home. I went straight to my parents' house. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived. She looked up from the dishes, surprised to see me. "Rebecca, I thought you were—" "We need to talk." Something in my voice made her stop. She dried her hands slowly, her eyes never leaving my face. "What's wrong?" "I went to Colorado." The color drained from her face. Not shock, recognition. "Rebecca, you knew. This whole time, you knew?" She didn't deny it, didn't try to explain. She just stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, while everything I believed about my family crumbled around us. "How long?" I asked. "Since the beginning, since before Melissa." "What does that mean?" My mother sat down heavily at the kitchen table. She looked tired, ancient, like she'd been carrying this weight for decades and it had finally become too much. "Your father and I, we have an arrangement. We've had one since before you were born." "An arrangement?" "We married for the wrong reasons, Rebecca. I was pregnant with you, and my parents were traditional. They insisted on a wedding. Tom agreed because it was the honorable thing to do. I felt like I'd been punched. You got married because of me?" "We got married because it was expected. And for a while, we tried to make it work. But Tom, he wasn't built for one life, one woman. He needed more than I could give him." "So you let him have another family?" "I let him be who he was. And in return, he provided for us. He was a good father to you. He was kind to me. We had a life, maybe not the one I dreamed of, but a life. That's not a marriage. That's a business arrangement." "Maybe, but it was ours." She looked at me with wet eyes. "I'm sorry you found out this way. I'm sorry you had to find out at all. I thought, I thought we could protect you from it forever." "Protect me? You lied to me my entire life? We gave you a stable home, two parents who loved you, a childhood without divorce or custody battles, based on deception, based on a father who was living a double life, and a mother who knew and said nothing." I was crying now, ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. My mother reached for me. I pulled away. "I can't do this right now," I said. "I can't look at you." I left before she could respond. I didn't speak to my parents for 2 weeks. I screened their calls, ignored their texts, threw myself into work like it could fill the hole that had opened up inside me. It couldn't. On the 15th day, I got a message from someone I didn't expect. Unknown. Asterisk. "Hi, this is Lucas Hartwell. I think you're my sister. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for an hour before responding. "Me. Asterisk. How did you find me?" "Lucas. Mom told me what happened. I found your social media. I'm sorry if this is weird, but I've been thinking about you a lot, about what it must have been like to find out." Me. "It was pretty terrible." "Yeah, I bet." We started talking, texting at first, then calls, then video chats. Lucas was smart, funny, surprisingly mature for 18. He'd known about me since he was 12. Melissa had told him and Sophie when they were old enough to understand. "I always wanted to reach out," he told me during one of our calls, But Mom said you didn't know, said it wasn't my place to blow up your life. I wish you had. I wish someone had told me years ago. Would it have been easier, knowing sooner? I thought about the childhood I'd had, the father I'd worshipped, the mother I'd trusted. I don't know, maybe not, but at least I wouldn't have spent 31 years believing a lie. For what it's worth, Lucas said, Dad loves you. He talks about you all the time, how proud he is, how smart you are, how you're the best thing he ever did. He says that about you and Sophie too, doesn't he? Yeah, he does. Lucas paused. I used to think that made it less special, like if he could say it about all of us, it didn't really mean anything. But I don't know. Maybe he just has a lot of love to give. Maybe that's not the worst thing. I didn't have an answer for that. Sophie and I talked too, eventually. She was angrier than Lucas, more protective of her mother, more suspicious of me. But over time, she softened. We found common ground in our shared frustration with our father, our shared confusion about what family meant when it was built on something this complicated. 1 month after my trip to Colorado, I had 2 new siblings. I still hadn't talked to my father. My mother called on a Sunday. Your father wants to see you, she said. He's not doing well, Rebecca. This silence is killing him. Maybe he should have thought about that before he spent 30 years lying to me. Maybe, but he's still your father, and whatever else he's done, he loves you. I didn't respond. He wants to explain, to tell you his side. Will you at least give him that? I wanted to say no, wanted to hang up and go back to my new life, my siblings, my anger, my carefully constructed distance from the parents who'd betrayed me. But I couldn't, because despite everything, I needed to understand. Fine, I said. 1 dinner, but you're not there. Just him and me. Of course. We met at a restaurant downtown, neutral territory. I got there early and sat with my back to the door, unable to watch him approach, unable to see the face I'd trusted my entire life. Rebecca? His voice. The same voice that had read me bedtime stories, cheered at my soccer games, walked me down the aisle at my college graduation. I turned around. He looked old, older than I'd ever seen him. There were circles under his eyes and a tremor in his hands that hadn't been there before. Dad, he sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I don't know where to start, he finally said. Try the beginning. So he did. He told me about meeting my mother, about the pregnancy, the pressure, the wedding neither of them really wanted. He told me about trying to be a good husband, a good father, and feeling like he was failing at both. He told me about meeting Melissa, about falling in love in a way he'd never experienced before, about making the impossible choice to have both, 2 families, 2 lives, 2 versions of himself. I know it was wrong, he said. I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I want you to understand. I never stopped loving you, not for a single moment. You weren't a consolation prize, Rebecca. You were my daughter, my first child, the person who taught me what it meant to be a father. But I wasn't enough. None of us were enough. It wasn't about enough. It was about... He struggled for words. I don't know how to explain it. I fell in love with Melissa. I couldn't imagine my life without her. But I also couldn't imagine my life without your mother, without you. So I tried to have everything. I tried to make it work. And you thought lying was the answer? I thought honesty would destroy everyone. Your mother agreed. She said she'd rather have half of me than none of me. Melissa felt the same. We built something that worked, even if it wasn't traditional. It wasn't traditional? Dad, you committed bigamy. You broke the law. He shook his head. Melissa and I were never legally married. We had a ceremony, but I never filed the paperwork. She knows. She's always known. Another lie. Another layer of deception. Does Lucas know? Does Sophie? Not the details. They think their parents are legally married. They don't know the truth. So you're lying to them too? You're lying to everyone. I'm protecting them, the same way I tried to protect you. That's not protection, Dad. That's control. You decided what we could handle, what we deserved to know. You made choices about our lives without ever giving us a say. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. You're right. I was selfish. I wanted everything, and I didn't care who I hurt to get it. I told myself I was doing it for love, but love doesn't require lies. I know that now. So what do you want from me? Forgiveness? I want you to know the truth, all of it. And then I want you to make your own choice about what happens next. The truth came out in pieces, some from my father, some from my mother, some from Melissa, who called me a week after the dinner to fill in gaps neither of my parents would acknowledge. Here's what I learned. My father hadn't just fallen in love with Melissa, he'd gotten her pregnant. Lucas wasn't born from a planned second family. He was born from an affair that spiraled out of control. My father had been seeing Melissa for 2 years before she got pregnant. When she told him, he panicked. But he couldn't walk away, couldn't abandon his child the way his own father had abandoned him. So he'd made a deal with my mother. He would stay married to her, would continue to provide for her and me, would never leave us publicly or legally. But he would also build a life with Melissa, a secret life, hidden from the world, funded by his second income as a consultant at a hospital in Denver. My mother had agreed because she had no other choice. She'd given up her career to raise me, had no savings, no skills, no way to support herself. And she still loved my father, despite everything. I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he'd eventually come back to me, she told me during one of our conversations. I thought Melissa was a phase, that he'd get tired of her, tired of the traveling, and come home for good. He never did. No, he never did. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came from Melissa. There's something else you should know, she said during our final phone call. Something Tom has never told anyone. What? Lucas isn't Tom's only child from our relationship. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Before Lucas, there was another pregnancy. Tom and I weren't being careful, and I got pregnant early, maybe 6 months into our affair. I was terrified. I was still just his patient, barely his mistress. I didn't know what to do. What happened? Tom asked me to end it. He said he wasn't ready, that it would destroy his marriage, his family, his career. He offered to pay for everything, to support me through the recovery. He said it was the right thing to do. She paused. I could hear her breathing, heavy and uneven. I agreed. I went to a clinic in another state. I went alone. And afterward, I told myself it was the right decision, that I wasn't ready either, that it was just a cluster of cells, not a person, not a life. Melissa. But I never forgot, and when I got pregnant with Lucas 2 years later, I told Tom, this time, we're keeping it. This time, I'm having this baby, and you're going to be a father to it. And if you don't like it, I'll tell Catherine everything. The room was spinning. You blackmailed him? I gave him an ultimatum. Maybe that's the same thing. But it worked. He stayed. He built a life with me. And I told myself that made up for what we'd done before. Does Lucas know? No number one knows except me and Tom. And now you. I sat with that information for a long time. My father, the man I'd worshipped my entire life, had asked a woman to end a pregnancy to protect his secrets, had built his second family not out of love, but out of fear of exposure, had lived with that guilt for 20 years while pretending to be the perfect father, the perfect husband, the perfect man. There are no perfect men, asterisk. There are only men who are better at hiding their imperfections. It's been 18 months since I found that photograph. 18 months of revelations, confrontations, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding my understanding of who I am and where I came from. My relationship with my father is different now. We talk, occasionally, but the easy warmth is gone. I see him clearly for the first time, a flawed man who made terrible choices and justified them with love. I don't hate him. I don't forgive him either. I exist somewhere in between, trying to find a balance I'm not sure exists. My mother and I are closer, strangely. We've had conversations we never could have had before. Honest conversations about her marriage, her regrets, the compromises she made to survive. She's not the victim I thought she was, but she's not the villain either. She's just a woman who did the best she could with impossible circumstances. Lucas, Sophie, and I have become something like family. We text almost daily. We've met in person 3 times, once in Colorado, once in my city, once at a random spot in the middle, just because we could. They're my siblings. Not half-siblings, not step-siblings, just siblings. Sophie told me recently that learning the truth about our father changed her too. She'd always suspected something was off. The unexplained absences, the phone calls he'd taken private, the way he sometimes seemed to be somewhere else, even when he was standing right in front of her. "I thought he was having an affair," she said. "I never imagined it was something worse." What could be worse than an affair? A whole other life, a whole other family, the realization that you were never as special as you thought you were. "You are special," I told her. "What he did doesn't change that." "I know, but it changes what it means. Being loved by someone who's lying to you isn't the same as being loved by someone who's telling the truth." She was right, and that was the hardest part of all of this, realizing that my father's love, however real it felt, was always tainted by deception. Every "I'm proud of you" was undercut by the secret he was keeping. Every hug carried the weight of the lies he'd told. Can you love someone and deceive them at the same time? I think you can. I think my father did. But I also think that kind of love is incomplete. It's love with conditions, love with walls, love that protects the liar more than the loved. And I deserve better than that. Last month, I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who specializes in family trauma. We've been unpacking everything: my childhood, my relationships, the patterns I've repeated without realizing it. "You have a choice," she told me during our last session. "You can let this define you, or you can let it inform you. The trauma is real, the betrayal is real, but what you do with it is up to you." What should I do with it? That's not for me to say, but I'd start by asking yourself, what kind of person do you want to be? Not who your father is, or who your mother is, or who anyone else is. Who do you want to be? I've been thinking about that question every day since, and here's what I've decided. I want to be honest. Painfully, uncomfortably honest. I want to build relationships that don't require lies to survive. I want to love people the way they deserve to be loved, openly, fully, without secrets hiding in the corners. I can't change what my father did. I can't undo the 31 years I spent believing a lie, but I can choose what happens next. And that choice, finally, is mine. So that's my story. The perfect father who wasn't. The second family I never knew existed. The truth that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my life. But I want to hear from you. If you discovered your parent had a secret family, would you want to know? Would you reach out to your half-siblings or keep your distance? And have you ever had to rebuild your understanding of someone you loved after discovering who they really were? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Because here's what I've learned. We're not alone in these experiences. Every family has secrets. Every person we love is hiding something. The only question is whether the truth brings us closer together or tears us apart. For me, it did both, and somehow I'm still standing. They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose what family means. For 31 years, I thought family meant perfection. Now I know it means showing up anyway. Imperfect, broken, real. And maybe that's enough. Asterisk. Rebecca.